Fantasy football playoff fates up for grabs in Week 14. The final bye and some notable injuries have just about everyone rummaging the wire. The San Fran flu continues to hit with the top two running backs in that room heading to the IR. Should make for widespread claims on that RB3 in a must-win situation for San Francisco. CBS fantasy analyst Heath Cummings helping us explore the obvious and beyond. Heath, always high demand, but your wisdom very much needed this week. So let's dive in here. Top of the conversation always is where we start with quarterbacks. And when you're looking at some of those quarterbacks, the top ones in the sport on the bye in some cases here fantasy-wise, what are you looking at for a potential popper at QB?
It's not very often that we get to look to the waiver wire and find a guy who just threw for 497 yards. Jameis Winston leads the NFL in passing yards since he became a starting quarterback. He's averaged 24.1 fantasy points per game. The interceptions are only -2. They don't hurt you that bad in fantasy football, just in real football, so you can live with those. And you might think, but wait a minute, Jameis is facing the #1 defense against opposing quarterbacks. He is, the Pittsburgh Steelers. Do you know who the #1 quarterback against opposing quarterbacks was last week? It was the Denver Broncos. It was the team that he just absolutely torched. The matchup, I don't think, matters at all. He's a top 10 quarterback. If it wasn't for the fact that he was playing the Steelers, he'd be a top 5 quarterback. Add Jameis and start him.
I saw an extrapolated number. If it was Jameis over a full schedule, we'd be looking at a new passing yards record this season. Jameis just racking it up, and we'll see if he can do it again here for somebody who needs it in that moment. Running backs, we've been having the conversation all season long, Heath. Isaac Guerendo, not going to make it far down that waiver order. Talk to me about the matchup with Chicago and maybe toss in a name beyond Guerendo if we're not in that prime position waiver-wise.
Yeah, and see, that's the key, is how much fab did you save? And I've had people ask me, like, I've got 45 fab left. Do I spend every last penny? Anything that you can use to go get Isaac Guerendo, you want to use. He is a top 12 running back for me this week against the Chicago Bears. I would expect he would be a top 12 running back rest of season as long as he stays healthy. This is not a new thing. We saw Jordan Mason the first 6 weeks of the season performing like a top 12 running back. We've seen in years past Elijah Mitchell, Jeff Wilson, Raheem Mostert. Next man up in the Kyle Shanahan offense turns into a must-start running back. That's Guerendo right now. I did have a sleeper that I put in there for this week, and he is also the second best option at running back when you're setting those contingent bids. So let's say you bid 80 fab, you got that much left on Guerendo, and you don't get him. Just throw a $5 bid out there for Sincere McCormick. That's right, Sincere McCormick. Over the last 2 weeks, he's been the leading rusher for the Raiders. Amir Abdullah handling some of those passing downs. We might get Alexander Madison back. We might get Zamir White back. I'm not sure it matters. Antonio Pierce raving about this kid. They actually had been bringing him up off the practice squad, just added him to their main roster, so he's going to stick around. He leads the Raiders running backs in avoid rate, in yards before contact per rush attempt, and in yards after contact per rush attempt. No matter who's healthy for that team, Sincere McCormick should be the #1 running back.
All right, he is the guy there beyond Guerendo, and I was always a Matt Breida guy myself, but to your point,
there you go.
Production always from that position in a Kyle Shanahan offense, and desperation also on the mind of San Francisco facing off with the Bears in Santa Clara. Wideout market always interesting. Let's go there next. Here's some accumulators, some boomer bust, some TD reliant names as well. What's the strategy as we approach this market here heading into a must-win Week 14?
I'll tell you, I've been resisting Nick Westbrook-Ikhine because you talked about it. It's the boom bust. It's the score. He scored a touchdown 7 of his last 8 games, but a lot of those games, it was 2 or 3 catches. It didn't look that sustainable. Last week, we saw 8 targets for Westbrook-Ikhine. Actually led the team ahead of Calvin Ridley. This week, he's facing a Jacksonville defense that is amongst the worst in football, if not the worst in football, giving up the 3rd most points to opposing wide receivers. The increased target share, plus 6 teams on a bye, plus the great matchup with Jacksonville, actually has pushed him into my top 36. He might approach my top 30 depending on who's healthy. In 3 wide receiver leagues, I actually feel good about starting Nick Westbrook.
Numbers tell us that if he's going to catch 3 balls, one of them is going to end up in the end zone.
That's right.
So we'll see if he does find the end zone once again. It's where he's made so much of his impact this year, and that impact going to be felt here in many ways in Week 14. We've looked at wideouts, we looked at quarterbacks, running back wise as well. Defense is an interesting one because I was sitting in this chair alongside Bryant McFadden a night ago, watching Jameis throw his third interception and watching B-Mac's hopes go out the window. We were both facing that Denver defense, and sometimes the defense can be the difference. If we're looking for that matchup that's going to break a heart or maybe make a day, be on the right side of it, what is that?
So if you'll remember last week, our number one defense was the Dallas Cowboys. I was actually out of it in one of our leagues, sitting at 4-8, went and spent $15 of fab on the Dallas Cowboys just so I could pick them up to beat Adam Azer to knock him out of the playoffs. They scored 20 points. Azer's out. You know who they did it against? His favorite team on Thanksgiving, the New York Giants. You know who's playing the Giants this week? The New Orleans Saints. I don't even think their defense is that good right now, but they're facing either Drew Lock or Tommy DeVito in a completely dismantled offensive line. Go pick up the Saints, start them against the Giants. Hopefully you put yourself in the playoffs, but if you're already out of it, go knock somebody else out this week.
All right. You know I like to do one just about my team. This is going to be everybody.
Yes.
Everybody. Sit aside for a second. We sat here and we waxed poetic about Taysom Hill being a potential league winner, and unfortunately, we saw him accumulating points, and then season comes to a close with a gruesome knee injury a week ago. I did not leave myself many contingency plans on my bench. Where should I be looking tight end-wise if I need to make a difference, a matchup you like, a name that's maybe going to give you some points but also presents a bit of a floor that we might not go empty-handed?
So I think like if they're available, it's one of the Dallas Cowboys. We don't know if Jake Ferguson's coming back this week, but he's actually available in about half of CBS leagues. Luke Schoonmaker has been filling in for him the last 2 weeks. He's done okay. He's available in even more leagues than Ferguson is. And the reason I bring those two names up, the Dallas Cowboys on Monday Night Football face the Cincinnati Bengals. The Bengals have given up the second most fantasy points to opposing tight ends. That sounds great. It's even better than that. Over the last month, each of their past 4 games, a tight end has scored at least 15.5 PPR fantasy points against this Bengals defense. They are absolutely dreadful. So if you can get one of those Cowboys, I wouldn't mind rostering both of them until we find out if Jake Ferguson is going to be available. And I'll throw in an extra just in case you can't get one of those guys. With Taysom Hill out, I think Juwan Johnson and Foster Moreau will both see more action at the tight end position. We saw Johnson last week with 7 targets. He would actually be my next favorite streamer.
Cowboys, Saints, and a prayer should be the strategy moving forward, at least personally. Give me your sleeper once again here. You threw it in there, but we were talking about sincere, maybe making an impact, and you think that it's not going to be reliant on a share. It is going to be pretty much an outright ball's his, and we'll see what the Raiders can do.
This Raiders team has had such a struggle running the football this year. We started off with Zamir White was the feature back in this offense, and he could barely average 3 yards per carry. Alexander Madison kept scoring touchdown and catching passes, so they gave the job to Alexander Madison, and all of a sudden he can't move the football at all either. Amir Abdullah saw a few touches, but the kid Sincere McCormick comes basically out of nowhere and has been, by almost every measure imaginable, the best rusher on this Raiders team. The team just, again, signed him from the practice squad to the active roster when they know they've got help coming back. It doesn't matter, I don't think. He is going to be the lead running back. He's a good flex this week, and if we get one more week of him seeing 15 carries, I'll view him as a number 2 running back.
Appreciative, as always, for the insight. Signed, sincerely yours, Heath Cummings. Thank you, Heath. And don't forget, it's that time of year. Make or break. You want to be in the playoffs? You angling for a bye? Fantasy football today. All the news and notes and information just like that. Heath Cummings, Adam Azer, Jamie Eisenberg, Dave Richard, the whole gang, making sure your week is a winning one.